The problem is you won't get a sprocket. You want to verify your timing marks. What that's used for is you put that on the outside of your cam sprocket. What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be working on my 2012 Zl1. Now, you guys might have seen this car when I was doing the clutch replacement on it, as well as some other things, but more importantly, today we're going to be doing a performance mod or mods on it to get it to go a little bit faster. Now, the car is not actually stock. If you look here, it already has an upper pulley. You can't quite see it, but it does have a Kong ported supercharger that's on it. This is a stock throttle body, which is part of the problem. It also has Mighty Mouse catch can. It has a aftermarket cooler for the supercharger, and then also it does have fueling as well as bigger injectors. Now, and then of course you guys saw the video where it also has a twin disc clutch, and I think in that video I explained that I went with the RXT or RXD McLeod, the one that can handle 1,000 horsepower. Now, the reasoning for that is because I already knew that I was going to be doing this to the car. So the first thing we're going to address on the car is the throttle body. So if you look at the throttle body on the car now, it's much smaller than the snout of the Charger, which is obviously restrictive. So we're stepping up to a 103 millimeter Nick Williams throttle body. Be doing that. Then going to be stepping over, doing the camshaft, and this camshaft here is a Brian Pulley Racing. It's their boost camshaft, and it's the stage 3 torquer cam, I believe it's called. Of course, got the push rods, beehive springs, got an ATI super damper with the hub, and then of course the 945 lower pulley. We have the bracket, which I think if you run more than 917 or something like that, you got to get this bracket to move one of the idler pulleys away so you don't have a problem. And then of course we have a Gates belt. Now, currently the car is roughly making, well, when I bought it, the individual I bought it from mentioned that the car, when he dynoed it, got it tuned with what it has now, made somewhere in the 630 range to the wheels, and that's on the 85. So the car does run the 85 and has been tuned. With all these upgrades, I'm thinking it should make well over 700, but we're gonna see. To get this thing started, we're gonna go ahead and start taking this upper part of apart. I already dropped the oil, already dropped the coolant. We're at minimum gonna have to get to each of the sides of the valve covers here to do the springs and the push rods, and then of course we're gonna have to remove all of this stuff so I can get to the balancer down there. Remove that. I got to get behind the water pump to get the cam in, which most likely will mean got to remove the radiator and so on and so forth. So let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so I want to take some time to show you guys what the ported snout looks like from Kong. So here's the snout, and then the inside of the blower. As you can tell that it was ported. Here's the old casting here, and then if you look inside, everything is smooth in terms of transitions. There's no lips in there. This isn't oversized versus the opening of the blower. And if you take caliper to it, to the opening, and go across, you're looking at roughly 107 millimeters or so, give or take. All right, now what's interesting is when this was ported, after that the stock throttle body went on. And as you can see how big of a choke point that would have been when you compare it to the opened up snout of that supercharger versus the 103, which still isn't quite as large, but definitely better than this. So there should be some gains in terms of power just from opening up the essentially the intake to the blower, which will then allow me to utilize the supercharger a little more efficiently and hopefully make a little bit more horsepower. So thus far, just looking at what I've done here, remove the fan unit, I got rid of the intake box here. I'm gonna go ahead and start taking apart this stuff here. I'm gonna try to do the cam with the radiator in the past. On other cars I haven't had that luck, but I'm gonna try doing it here because I do have the transmission lines going in and the well, really it's just the transmission lines that are going in there that I really don't want to take out. The AC, I think it's for the condenser behind it, which in reality I could probably just get away with leaving in here. So I'm gonna take all this apart, see if I can get the cam in there, but before I even try putting the cam in, of course we'll have to get the rockers off and pull the push rods out, and then lift the lifters up and then pin them so they're not falling down when you pull the cam out. So I'll show you guys that process, and should be getting to it here very shortly. Now if you get a big enough lower pulley for your car, in this case mine's a 945, one of the things as an option that you will be asked to, if you want, I think at a certain point in time, can't remember the size, but you have to get is a lower pulley relocation bracket. I just want to take some time to show you guys what that is. So that bracket is this guy here, which is also, that's what this is. And really what happens is you have the larger pulley and you have a smaller pulley. The larger one goes up top, the smaller one goes down there. And what happens is when you increase the size of this, it starts to impede on the clearance for this guy here, right? So if you can imagine, if the balancer is bigger, this guy is going to start getting in the way. So what the bracket does is when you mount it in the same fashion, if you look down there where the lower pulley is, it'll end up being just slightly over to the left. All right, so I don't know if that comes out very good on the camera, but if you watch it, it definitely moves over. So if you think that you can run without it, there is a limit. I forgot what the size is, where it's on the cusp and then it's recommended, and then of course there's a size where you absolutely have to do this. And if you order from DSX, they'll tell you which one is necessary for the relocation bracket for the car. So far fairly easy getting this bracket off, and I'm just going to continue pulling everything in order. One thing to look out for when you're removing your idler pulley bracket is you're going to have 4 bolts that come off, but they are different sizes. So the one all the way at the bottom is the shortest one. So if you end up mixing them up, the easiest thing to do is look at your bracket, look here, and you'll note that these 3 holes are in the same plane, and this one is a little bit closer to you, which is why this one's a little bit shorter versus these ones. Well, so far it has been a fairly straightforward process. Took the water pump off. You got to get rid of a few of the brackets around here. I'm going to try to keep that guy on here as well as the alternator. I went ahead and took the crank bolt out, and then I'm using my 3-claw puller here with the longest rod. I'm going to just go ahead and pull that off, and then after that just got to disconnect the sensor here, pull the front plate off, and we are right there by the crank. After that, got to jump off the front end to the sides, get the valve covers off. I'm going to go ahead and pull the plugs, pull the rocker arms off, and then going to do the springs and the push rods, and then assemble the whole thing back together, and hopefully I don't have to take this guy out, but we'll find out here shortly. Okay, so got the driver's side done. As you can see, it's fairly simple. Now this side here has a lot more space than this side here, so I just got started on this side here. At minimum, had to pull the dipstick here to be able to get to the spark plug. Had to move some things around with the harness, and then this E85, this sensor ordeal here, had to move around it to get it done. So I'm going to continue working on this. I think it's going to get kind of tight back there, but should still be able to do it relatively easy, and then jump over to the cam and find out if I have to take apart the radiator or not. Alright, so I finally got the old cam out. As you can see there, it's out. I accidentally snapped one of my wooden rods that you keep the lifters up with, so I had to use some heavier gauge wire to keep the lifters up. If you don't know what I'm talking about, on the sides of your cam up top, you have like these two holes. They're basically oil passages. As you before you pull the cam, you got to twist it, and you'll kick the lifters up, and then you insert something all the way to the back of the motor. Make sure it's something that's not going to damage it. And essentially what you're doing is you're keeping the lifters from falling down into the motor after you pull the cam out. So let's pull that cam out. You can put the new one in, but before you can do that, what I found out was that you cannot do it with the radiator in. You can leave the air conditioning condenser in, but you're gonna have to move it all the way up to get the cam out. So I got the new cam here. As you can see, it's the stage 3 torque cam from Pulley Racing. I'm gonna go ahead, wipe it down, put some assembly lube on it, and it's gonna go back in. Alright, so I want to take some time to show you guys this. As you're nearing the end of putting your cam in, what you're going to find out is it's going to be difficult for you to grab it and orient it and twist it to get it in, so the last cam bearing lobe in the back seat. So a good trick, which I'm sure a lot of you know, but if you don't know, you take your water pump bolts and you put them in, and then as you're putting the cam in, just very gently twist, and you can articulate the cam, and it'll seat right in. So to make room for putting in the cam on your car, you're going to remove the radiator. You're going to have this air conditioner condenser unit here. You're going to want to move these hoses away like that, and then you're going to want to lift this guy up so you create enough space for your cam to seat back there, so you can line it up and put it in there. That'll save you from having to disconnect your AC lines, which will cause more work for you. Okay, one thing I want to point out to you guys when you're doing the cam kit on your LSA motor. So if you order from Pulley Racing, you get a chance to change out your springs, retainers, all that stuff, push rods, and then of course you get a cam. The problem is you won't get a sprocket. Alright, so if you end up buying that kit, make sure you account for a 3-bolt sprocket, because the one that comes on your car stock is not a 3-bolt, it's just a single bolt through the center. All the cams, or unless the cam is not 3-bolt, which I don't know if they have aftermarket ones that aren't 3-bolt, you're going to need one of these sprockets. Otherwise you're going to have to stop in the middle of a project and get it. One other thing to note is, as you're doing this, you want to verify your timing marks. So you have a timing mark here, then you have a timing mark down there on the sprocket. It's a dot, so you want to make sure that that points up, and then your sprocket points down directly at it. And then when you put everything together, I always just turn it by hand just to make sure that it all clears and rolls like it should. Alright, so I got the cam put in, and both sides of the motor have the rockers in them. Alright, so as always, I've done a short on this before, but if you don't know, before you put everything back together, I always crank it by hand. And really what you're looking for is any kind of binding. Looking for the rocker arms to move. Make sure that you don't hear any weird pinging, any kind of mechanical impeding of components. And after that, you're basically done. Now, well, you're done with just putting everything in. One thing I wanted to cover with you guys is with the cam kit, you might get this cam retainer plate. What that's used for is you put that on the outside of your cam sprocket, and when you put your bolts in, now I always use thread lock with these bolts anyway, but put my thread lock on, put this in, and then you put the plate on, and when you're done making sure that everything clears, everything's torqued down, you just take these tabs and you bend them inwards just so they make sure that the bolts don't back out. So I mean, that's double security on these bolts, as it would be pretty detrimental if that did come off. All right, so getting your ATI balancer put together is a little complicated when you look at it at first, but it's pretty straightforward. You also have the instructions here, but I'll walk you guys through it just so you guys know what's going on here. So the first thing you want to do with your super damper balancer is you want to find the offset hole, and that's this guy here, and it'll point to it. And then you'll also have this guy here. Okay, so your hub's going to look like that. Now when you put these two together, they simply drop in place like so. Now if yours doesn't go in as easy, you might have to work on it a little bit and get it to seat down. There's instructions in there to tell you kind of what to do, but ultimately you don't want to smash this thing with a hammer. Just use your hands, get that thing down. Now you have 6 of these short little bolts that have the Loctite already on them. I'm still going to use some more Loctite. Quick note, these bolts are Torx T40, so make sure that you have one of these guys before you start. And the way it works is these guys, you're going to have 2 take up 3 of these, 2 take up 3 of these holes, 2 take up 3 of these holes. You're going to snug these down, and then the third hole is going to be for these longer bolts. And what these longer bolts do is they go all the way through, and when you flip it on the other side, you're going to take your pulley that runs your air conditioner. You're going to put that guy on, and it'll tell you when you look at it, where is it? It'll say engine side here. So you'll want this out, and you are going to align. There's larger holes and smaller holes. You're going to want to align the holes that fit this bolt with the holes that this bolt's going to go to from the other side, and then you're going to torque everything down. All right. Then once that's done, that is when your pulley goes on, and your pulley will actually use these non-countersunk holes here, and they will, at least mine, came with these bolts here. They're of course not T40, but came with these bolts with the Loctite on there. So hopefully this helps you guys out in terms of putting this whole thing together. Makes it a little less complicated. We're getting fairly close to being done here. So as you guys can see, the whole front here has been put together. Got the radiator in. Just got to put the fans in. One thing that you are going to want to make sure you pay attention to are these 2 lines down here. These are your either transmission or diff. I think it's transmission lines that come into the radiator. They're very close to this bottom pulley, depending on how big your pulley is. So just I zip tied mine together, and they're being held down. So there's maybe a centimeter between the pulley and those lines, but just want to make sure that that clears adequately, and then just double check to make sure that the routing of your belts are good. Other than that, everything else is going together fairly smooth. No issues. Should be able to fire it up here shortly. Alright, so I got everything put together on the car. As you can see here, we have the intake is on. Got the throttle body, the bigger throttle body on there. Got everything buttoned up. I did refill the coolant. I'm gonna do the burping procedure here before I start it. Well, not start it, but before I crank it over. Got oil in it. Double checked everything one more time. Before I start it, I pulled the injector fuses, so it can't start. I'm gonna go ahead and crank it a few times just to make sure there are no issues. Once I crank it a few times, make sure there's no issues, I'm gonna go ahead and put the injectors, or the fuses for the injectors, back in. I'm gonna go ahead and start it for the first time.